Up next on Saving Lives, we can't wait any longer. We focus on schools and what our education system can do to help students struggling with depression and other issues that can lead to suicide. So stay tuned.
Larry Burns, President and CEO of the Children's Foundation.
I'm pleased to partner with Detroit Public TV, Kevin Song, and other key organizations in this series of conversations on suicide awareness and prevention. At the Children's Foundation, our goal is to make a positive, lasting impact on the health and wellness of families in Southeast Michigan and beyond. Today's program is an important step in creating a dialogue on the issue of suicide in our communities. Please join us in this effort to address this urgent problem and share solutions for families and their loved ones at risk. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Canty from Detroit Public Television. And today we continue our discussion of a most urgent crisis amongst our youth today, the soaring rate of suicide and what we can do to reverse this very troubling trend. You may have heard the numbers before, but they certainly bear repeating. And here it is. The suicide rate for teens in Michigan has doubled over the past decade. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death among our youth. And now we're all trying to figure out how to live with the challenges of this COVID-19 pandemic. Although we don't know yet just what the impact will be on the mental health of our youth, COVID certainly adds another layer of stress and anxiety for those already at risk. Today, we focus on schools and what our education system can do to help students struggling with depression and other issues that can lead to suicide. The school's role in mental health is certainly critical. It's educators that play such a major role in the lives of our students. Working closely with parents and families, it's educators who can identify young people who need help and then intervene in a timely and a caring manner. It's not an easy task, but it is happening in classrooms across the state and the country. Today, we'll look at some approaches to suicide prevention, the programs and practices that are proving effective, and what resources schools need to ensure the mental health and well-being of their students. It is a crucial conversation, and it's part of a year-long campaign by Detroit Public Television, Kevin Song, and the Children's Foundation to shine a light of compassion and understanding on an issue that has too long remained in the shadows. And now let me introduce our panel. Seth Huppengarner is principal of Ishpeming Middle and High School. We also have Patrick Watson, who's superintendent of Bloomfield Hills Schools. JoJo Klingler is a parent who lost a son to suicide, and she has been active in the cause of suicide prevention ever since. And Dr. Jackie Sanderlin, author, educator, someone who has worked to reduce trauma and teen suicide, particularly in urban schools. Thank you all so much for being with us. And we're going to start out by watching a segment of a new video from the Kevin Song organization. It's called We Need to Talk.
The first is the story of West Bloomfield High School, a high-achieving school of some 2,000 students that in just 3 years experienced the suicides of 4 students and a teacher.
One of the things I had to reflect upon when we had the suicides that occurred is what was my role as a leader. Everyone in the school was very, very depressed about what was going on, and we were struggling. The community was struggling, and people are saying, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't trained.
Enter Ryan Buell, a former student and friend of Principal Watson, who started a company called the Live Network to develop a whole new approach to teaching mental health in schools at an age when youth are becoming most susceptible. The name of the program is Prepare You.
The key concept behind Prepare You is that individuals learn through a process. They learn through an experiential process. It's very important that they're getting these tools because they are at a critical intervention point in making lifelong decisions. So there's 15 classes that are intentionally designed to take them through an emotional arc so that by the time they get to 7, 8, 9, the top of the arc, they have built relationships within the group. They've built tools to understand how to process anger, how to challenge their distorted thinking, how to engage.
Anytime you start something new, there's always going to be resistance. In education, there's a strong addiction to certainty. So there was a little uncertainty, which made people a little uncomfortable. We implemented it in 9th grade health because we really wanted our students to have that base. And it was also a natural fit within the health course because there is a component about mental health that is covered in our health curriculum, but not to the extent that it should be covered.
As a freshman using Prepare You, you don't know how to go through high school. You know, you're so used to middle school and how easy it was your 8th grade year that once you get to high school, it hits you like a train. And you get slapped with homework and tests and reading and all of that. And you just get this overwhelming sense of stress. And with Prepare You, it helps you learn how to deal with that.
Well, Pat, as we just saw in this video, you were the principal of West Bloomfield High School, and now you've been appointed the superintendent of Bloomfield Hills School. So congratulations on that, Pat.
Thank you. And one of the things we did and that I want to bring to Bloomfield Hills is shifting that mindset. I think so often as adults, we always try to look at a student's problem through our own lens. And one of the things that, I help build the foundation for is looking at it through the lens of a student. And if a student's in crisis, we need to understand as adults, they're in crisis. And a lot of times, and I was guilty of this myself, you see the student, they're upset, they're crying. Hey, what's the matter? Well, I got a B on my AP Chem test. Well, you're a second semester senior. You have a 4.3. What's the big deal? What are you worried about? It'll be fine. You're fine. We don't validate the feelings that they're having. And so that was a huge mind shift that we made. And then bringing in Prepare You and working with Ryan Buell, we have lots of conversations in education about how many languages that we're going to offer, how many different math classes, how many IB classes, how many AP classes. And if we're really, truly going to help all of our students, we need to prepare them for life. We need to be able to prepare them to go out and be mentally healthy. And that's going to help them be better children, better parents, better adults, better partners in life. And as I reflected on what is the real purpose of school and knowing that, hey, even if you don't get an A in Spanish 1, you still can be a successful, well-functioning adult. You can go on and have any career you pretty much want. But we really needed to focus as a school on that mental health piece and on self-care. And, we keep wondering, and I was wondering, why aren't kids more resilient? Why can't they just deal with it? Why can't they get over it? Why are all these things happening? Is it the food? Is it this? And eventually, as a group of leaders in the building, we decided it didn't matter the reason why. We needed to deal with the reality of what was going on, the crisis that was going on, and just deal with it because it was landing on our desks. It was in our classroom, the anxiety, the depression. And so we really shifted our focus overall as a school to meet the mental health needs first. So whether it was bringing in Prepare You, bringing in meditation and having students go through meditation, whether bringing in Safe Talk, bringing in You Matter Week. We created a health and wellness program for our staff and for our students.
You knew you needed to take care of the staff as well as the students. And I think when I think of those tough years when you were principal at West Bloomfield High School, losing students, losing a teacher, that had to have been a tough thing for you to approach personally and professionally.
It was beyond difficult. I have all these years of education and I wasn't trained for this. I didn't know what to do. And yet everyone was looking for me as a leader. You need to do something. And there was a lot of blame. A lot of people said, well, you must be doing something wrong to make the kids and a staff member do that. There's so much unknown about mental health, what actually goes on. And we don't feel comfortable talking about it. We might talk about, the birds and the bees, so to speak, with our own children, but we talk about here are coping strategies. Here are things you can do when you're stressed. Here's self-care advice that I can give you. I don't know if that really often goes on. So I was very grateful for Ryan Buell to kind of, get together with me and put together a program that allows kids to have the conversations they're already having. And when it really, really struck home with me is when I sat in a class and they were talking about Snapchat. And, the teacher was sharing, how many of you had this experience where you ask your friends, hey, what are you doing? It's a Friday night. And they all say, we're busy. We can't go out. We have to stay home. And then you see their Snapchat stories. and they're all out. They're all having the best night of their lives, but you weren't invited. And the two people that you supposedly weren't friends with were invited. And see the teacher work through the mindset of now you think no one likes you, they're your fake friends. Why are they lying to you? Why do they hate you? And seeing the teacher talk about how your mind works that way, and then what can you do to kind of combat that type of mindset. And then hearing the other kids share out, yeah, that happened to me, and here's how I felt. These are conversations they should be having at home that many aren't having at home. And we wanted to make sure that in school, we created a safe environment for students to have those conversations, that understand why your mind is saying those things to you. And then, just as important, what do you do about it? How do you move forward as a person? And those things, I mean, I almost want to cry about it now, but it makes a huge difference.
Very much so. I want to turn now to the Upper Peninsula. Seth, you're an education teacher in a relatively small town in the Upper Peninsula. Are there special community mental health challenges that your kids face that you can share with us?
Well, there definitely is in the UP. We unfortunately, being a rural area, we really don't have the resources that that areas downstate do in larger metropolitan areas. So our mental health services, particularly for teens, is lacking, to be honest with you. So a lot of this, as a lot of things do in our society today, kind of fall back on the school. And I think I really appreciated what Patrick was saying about, as educators, we're kind of trained to critically solve problems, and as they come up, including with individual students, like students will come into my office, and kind of how we're trained is to fix that problem and give them a solution to that. And I think what has kind of become a realization for us, unfortunately, as a school, we have had a couple suicides in the last 10 years. And so when you're faced with that, I think what we've had to realize is that what really is required with teens today is non-judgmental listening to their problems, and just hearing what they're saying and giving them an outlet where they feel support. And I think a lot of that, especially up here, but I'm sure even downstate, that supportive environment really does fall on the school. And because there is still enough of a stigma with mental health that it's a real leap for people to say, I need enough help that I will reach out to a facility, to a mental health facility, to actually get intensive therapy if they feel like they need that. I mean, that's a real leap, because that's because of the stigmas involved. And so schools have to proactively provide a safe environment for students to let us know we need help.
And tell us about the initiative that you've been having going on at Ishpeming.
The catchphrase in a lot of schools is the whole child approach. And I think it's kind of that, obviously schools have to provide academic rigor, academic excellence, and opportunity for our students. But my goal as a principal for our students is that by the time they graduate, they're confident young people. And I think confidence is not the same as self-esteem. And confidence comes from actually, having some success and learning how to do things and being on your own a little bit, and having the ability to advocate for yourself. And so those are all skills that we've, as a staff in our school district, have really decided to focus on, are things that we would associate with resiliency. And I think we're seeing results, is that we're developing some really confident young people.
I know you had the Live campaign, and I love the words love, include, value, and engage. Has that made a difference?
That's made a huge difference, especially my first year here as principal was 3 years ago. And it was actually a month into my first year that literally the morning of a school day, we had a junior in high school commit suicide that morning. And that was, those of you who have been through that, it never leaves you. It never leaves you. And so that year obviously was a lot of Band-Aids. We put a lot of Band-Aids on a lot of really raw emotion. And at the end of that year, we recognized as a collective staff that yes, that was necessary, but what we really need to do is build skills and really focus on living skills, and not just responding to sadness and anxiety, but actually focus on living skills. And so the Live campaign, there's physical activity built in, there's mental health, there's a variety of things that are really built into, again, building that confidence. And And part of that is also, we really stress to young people, it's okay to be sad. That's a normal, natural human emotion that we all feel all the time. And I hear that a lot from young people, is that they feel like, well, I'm sad. That means that there's something wrong with me. And it's no, it just means that you're sad. And so we've really tried to focus on the last 2 years. And again, I'm sure this will kind of come across through things like mindfulness. We do yoga with our students, a variety of things. And it's really to kind of ideally kind of remind young people to be in the moment and to live each moment. And no judgment. It's, you can't say it was better in our day or back in the old days. It doesn't matter. It is what it is now. And so we have to adjust to what it is now.
Nancy Buell is a recognized leader in education and mental health in the Macomb Intermediate School District. Let's hear her thoughts about what support students need and how educators and other adults can help.
So the single strongest factor in helping somebody feel resilient is having one close relationship with an adult. If you look at the theory of suicide and suicidality, it'll show you that individuals who are thinking that their life isn't worth living feel disconnected and feel like they're a burden to other people. If we want to make a difference to help save lives, we need to show people that they are connected to us. We want to relate to them on a human level and show that we care and we're non-judgmental and that we can hear the tough stuff of life. It's startling when you start to open up this line of communication, how many youth are just begging and crying to be heard, to be seen. They're saying, see me. If we can tap into their humanness by us being human and really connecting with them, you're gonna learn so much. And they won't have to suffer in silence anymore, because that's what's killing our kids, is their inability to recognize that they matter to you, they matter to us, they matter to every adult, every youth, they matter to them. If they're suffering with their pain and their silence inside, it eats away at their stamina, their ability to be mentally healthy, and then they attempt and or die by suicide. It doesn't take much to stop that. It takes us connecting. It takes us not being afraid to ask the question. We don't have to know the answer. We just have to know enough to be able to ask that question and then get that youth to the person who is trained in mental health that can get them to the next level.
Those are some very, very powerful thoughts. I want to turn now to JoJo Klinger. And JoJo, I cannot thank you enough for being here and joining us today. I know you lost your child, Nicholas, to suicide. He was 17 years old. Tell us a little about how that loss galvanized you and your husband, Fritz, to take action.
When we lost Nicholas, it happened for us suddenly. I think Nicholas had been struggling with depression, and so it came about to us suddenly, and we scrambled for about 10 days and then lost the battle to suicide. And I think my husband and I both said, if we can help just one person not go through what we've been through, it'll be worth all the effort in the world. And then just trying to understand it too. I have 3 other children and want to be able to tend to them. In the 2.5 years that I've lost Nick, I have learned a lot. And part of it is a feeling like, man, I wish I would have known this before. But just listening to Nancy, she's so right. You don't have to have the answers. And especially as parents, when we're looking at our child, it is sometimes hard to decipher what they're really going through and the intensity of that they're going through it. And but what I've learned to do is find some words to ask the question. And
such as?
I think that is so important, to ask the question of suicide and depression and to say those words, because I think for my generation, you just didn't say it. You just didn't ask. You thought maybe you would say the wrong thing or you would give them an idea. And couldn't be farther from the truth. You're not going to cause someone to make a suicidal attempt just by asking them, but you are going to help someone bring to light their feelings if you do. And just as Nancy said, you don't have to have the answers. You just need to get a gauge of where they're at. So that leads into the importance of the professionals who know how to talk to someone who is going through this time period. And it won't last forever, is to get them through this time period. And what I found as my family was trying to heal is I think some of these kids don't have the language or the words to express how they feel. So these programs in the school help give them those tools. They're feeling these high anxiety, and the anxiety leads into depression. And they are experiencing anxiety off the charts. And but they don't necessarily have the words to express how they're feeling. So they need help with that. And when you have intense feelings and going through this ourselves, I didn't have the words, and my kids didn't have the words to express how they were feeling. The emotions are so intense. And so to have these programs help you get that out is so important. And that's how the professionals help. It's amazing the people who deal with this on a regular basis, how much they can help. I don't think I realized how much they know and how much they can lead you through a place to get you to a better place.
I want to bring in Dr. Jackie now, who is here with us from Southern California, where you've worked with urban schools in struggling neighborhoods, Dr. Jackie, where students often face specific challenges. Could you talk a little more about that?
The things that I think that I learned by being a principal for many years, 18 years of my career, in under-resourced communities, was that there had to be a different approach. We hear a lot about interventions in many schools, urban schools. I mean, that's like one of the catchphrases, but that's hard to do. It's very hard to do. Oftentimes it's not done. But we decided to change that and have a focus on preventions. And having a preventative mindset, it began to help us to look on the inside as to what we were doing or not doing to prevent the lack of confidence, to prevent the lack of empowerment. In fact, we stopped even talking about student engagement and we started talking about student empowerment. So we also started looking at our words as educators and also putting youth in the leadership role. Because one of the things that we also found as we began to really start to look at ourselves was how much are our students talking? In fact, we don't even call them students, I call them scholars. Because I believe if you speak into the life of a young person, they will rise to that occasion. And so even that, when I heard Seth and Patrick, and they were both very similar, talking about, how confidence is even different than self-esteem. Well, even a student is different than a scholar. And when you grow up at my school in a community where there was high level of gang violence, if your parents are in prison for life, how do you wrap your mind around for life? You have to have preventions in place rather than interventions. Interventions, you rarely never catch up. And they don't have time. Before you put it in place, they're gone, they're graduated. But preventions are when we really we even developed a prevention center. We took away the counseling office and we made it a prevention center. And it was led by scholars who also had stories to tell. So that's one of the things that JoJo mentioned, raising their voices and empowerment. I learned so much as well over the years, and I learned that we can't do it alone.
Let me ask each of our educators, what's the most important takeaway for other school districts as they respond to the stresses and the issues that our kids face today? Jackie, I'll let you start.
One most important thing for me, for a leader is to, especially for a school, is to work with community partners in your community. Because if you try to do it all by yourself, you're going to be torn up and tired, worn out, don't have the resources. And that can change not only your school, but can change your community when those children leave your school.
Seth?
I would say it's simply as for schools to prioritize mental health, because I think that's not a natural thing for schools to do. We're so pressed for academic. There's a lot of pressure for athletics. There's all these things that are pressures in traditional schools. And I think we really have to change the way we think and prioritize whole child teaching and mental health for our young people.
Pat?
Kind of echo what everyone else has said, but the other important key is you have to have a plan. You know, if we were talking about academics, how can we raise SAT, ACT scores? We look at all the data. We bring in all kinds of consultants. We bring in professionals. We bring in the staff. We bring in the community, and we would develop a plan. That same amount of detail and intention and effort needs to be spent on mental health. It's just as important, if not more important, than the academic piece. I could argue that if you didn't make it through Algebra 2 and you took a math-based class, you can still go and, again, be the successful human being. But if we haven't prepared you to be mentally healthy when you've left the school, that is something that is always going to be a disadvantage for you for your entire life.
Now let's focus on something that has been launched in Michigan. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has taken what many in the mental health community think is a long overdue step. She created the Michigan Suicide Prevention Commission, which had its first meeting in March. The chair of the commission is Dr. Brian Ramadani, who's director of the Center for Health Policy and Health Sciences Research at the Henry Ford Health System. I spoke recently with Brian to talk about the work of the commission and how this pandemic might affect students struggling with mental health issues. You are very much an expert in suicide prevention. Tell us, how will this commission achieve that goal in Michigan?
Well, the commission is going to develop a state suicide prevention strategy and a set of recommendations to provide to the state governor and to the legislature so that they can make some decisions about how to move forward with various interventions and different strategies to try and really drive down the suicide rate in the state of Michigan.
Why is this commission needed?
Well, we've had a pretty significantly increasing suicide rate in the state of Michigan and really nationally and in many parts of the world as well for the last 20 years, actually. In many parts, and including Michigan, our suicide rates have increased up to 30% during that time.
So you have a tall order on this commission, and there are how many members on the commission?
So there are 27 members on the commission, including additional members from the state of Michigan that are providing support. The members come from a whole host of different areas. They come from universities, they come from healthcare systems, big and small. They come from community healthcare and behavioral healthcare organizations. They come from schools. They come from the police and law enforcement, from the fire department, from various advocacy groups across the state, and also leadership positions in different state agencies that are really instrumental potentially in our prevention opportunities moving forward.
So how will you work, and particularly with the governor and the legislature, because they're the ones that can affect the change that you're going to recommend?
The first tall order is to rapidly develop a draft set of plans and identification of risk for why Michiganders are increasing their risk of suicide. So we're going to outline a series of risk factors, where people are coming from in the state. So that's a lot of epidemiology, but also then kind of outline a series of activities that are also already underway in the state, and then how we could leverage those, plus provide some, a list of potential interventions that may be a good fit for the state to think about implementing moving forward in specific and key areas, aligned with special populations and areas of high need.
What are your worries about this COVID-19 pandemic and what it will mean for these very important mental wellness efforts within schools with the students?
First of all, in many ways, I think schools can provide a resource that kids wouldn't get anywhere else. In many cases, they provide meals, they provide education, they provide, positive role model adults. They provide an avenue for kids who may not otherwise have an outlet to outreach to somebody, to have a connection, to connect with peers, all extremely important in mental well-being. Now, it is interesting because I think there are potentially two sides to this. The other side of this story is that some kids do experience bullying in schools, and there's a lot of kind of bad that happens from their experience in a school setting. And what might happen, we don't know this yet, but what might happen is that this period allows a reset for those kids. That, rather than going to school every day, seeing all these peers who may be bullying them, who, they're having these terrible experiences, and they go on social media at night, see the same kinds of behavior. But maybe there's an opportunity, and I'm just saying this with hope in mind, but maybe there's an opportunity for some kids to benefit from this period of a break from school. Where they have an opportunity to reset, refresh, get healthy, and then be able to go back. But I do think that schools offer a tremendous resource, and overall are beneficial to kids' overall well-being and emotional stability.
Seth, let me ask you, how important do you think the creation of this commission is in the work that you do? What would you like to see from it?
Well, again, in the Upper Peninsula, I think if it would lead to greater resources and facilities and supports up here in the UP, that would be more than welcome. I think schools could provide a hub, because I think that's the one place that you're going to find young people is in a school. And so I think schools can definitely partner with resources and organizations from the state level as kind of a way to connect kids to those resources. And I know we're in a time where there's a lot of budget crunches and a lot of talk about budgets going on at the state level, which is, I understand that's a reality, but just more services to connect to in the Upper Peninsula, and I'm sure even downstate that's an issue as well. So that would be welcome.
Pat, how well do you feel government officials and the state legislature support you in the work that you and your team do every day?
I think the intent is there, but we're really not seeing what needs to happen. In my opinion, enough of the task force, enough of the meetings and bringing all the people together. We know there's an issue. I mean, how many more data points do we need before something's finally done? And if you're asking me what needs to be done, I'll gladly give you my answer. The state of Michigan needs to mandate a mental health course as part of the graduation requirements. We mandate PE, we mandate health, we mandate they need fine arts, but we're not going to mandate they need mental health as a class based on all the information. And then they need to support it. They need to provide the funding to support the class, provide funding to have a crisis counselor in every single building in the state of Michigan. The counselors we have are great. They're great with telling you what classes to pick. They can help you with some of the mental health, but that's not their background. They're not crisis counselors. So the answers are there. And I'm just tired of all the talk. And then what happens? A paper comes out with a lot of research and a lot of statistics, and then the task force disbands, and the final message is, wow, we have a problem. We really need to do more about it, and then it ends. So I have a lot of frustration with that. I look at Prepare You, I look at the data, whether it was in West Bloomfield or now in Bloomfield Hills, we have it as well. You hear the narratives from the students who share what a difference it's made to them. Now, as a student, if you have a friend in crisis, you know what you can do, you know where to get help for that friend. But yet, we're not seeing the state of Michigan come in and say, okay, we're going to vet one of many programs, and maybe that's one of the many. And then we're going to say, this is a program every school is going to use, and we're going to have a full semester of nothing but mental health. Looking at the homework that the students did during this unit with Prepare You, it was all based on self-care and journaling and being intentional about taking care of yourself. Things I never would have thought about doing in the 80s growing up as a child. So that's where I think the work needs to be done. And, I'm hoping it will be done. But at the end of the day, hope is not a plan. And right now from the state, I don't see a plan. I see a lot of talk, the same talk that's been going on for about a decade.
Jackie, across the country, uh, we're getting a strong sense that the economic upheaval because of COVID-19 is really going to be hitting schools. They're still putting all the pieces together and deciding what kind of impact, but we really get a sense between budget holes, between teachers either having to be pink slipped or deciding they're not coming back to the classroom, the added expense districts are going to have to put to make their classrooms safe in this era of COVID-19. Jackie, do you worry that mental health is going to get pushed to the back burner?
Well, I do. I share the same sentiments that I've already heard. And I believe that what you're saying is, what are we going to do? And I know the intentions are right, of course, with school districts, but budgets are going to get smaller and time is going to even get smaller than that. So I challenge, and this is why I am a proponent and an ambassador for community partnerships. This is why, and I don't think that it's going to get better. I don't think the finances are going to come at a huge rate. And when we hear that there is a need for resources and there's a need for wellness centers and there's a need for safe spaces, these are opportunities that are before you. Problems present opportunities.
Jojo, speaking as parent and one that has had her life changed forever by losing a child to suicide, what do you want to say to parents watching now about advocating to help the schools, help our kids?
I think parents need to let the school know that this is what they want. I had a school tell me one time that the parents were apprehensive about talking about suicide and having a suicide prevention as part of their health class. And I think we need to get past that as parents in our generation, because I think our kids are open to talking about it. I think they are. And so we need to let the schools know we want this, that this is okay. This is the right thing to do.
And the legislature, the people that hold the purse strings and the resources?
They're the ones that are going to make it happen. That the legislature has, if they say you need to make this part of the curriculum, then it's part of the curriculum. And again, it's the right thing to do for our kids, for our families, for all of our own well-being. And it will help the parents too. The parents will learn along the way, I think too, as the kids come home and talk about it and share what they're doing. I think that it will help the parents. I thought I was a somewhat informed parent. I stayed on top of what my kids were doing. I was involved. I was involved with the schools. I was at the schools. But you don't know what you don't know. And so I think the parents will learn too. And I think the state can really, really make it happen for everybody.
Let's hear more now from Dr. Ramadani about his hopes for the governor's commission on suicide prevention. Do you have a set time as far as when you're going to deliver recommendations and plans?
So we're moving very quickly. The governor, this is a very important issue, and we would have started even sooner if it wouldn't have been for the COVID crisis. But this is an important issue on both sides of Republicans and Democrats. It's just a big issue supported across the board. And so we're moving quickly. We had our first meeting in May, and we're already proposing to have a first draft available of our report by the fall of this year, and then also to have a final report done by next spring, which is a pretty rapid time period for a commission of this size and this scope across the state.
What do you think success of the commission will look like?
I think success will be us coming out with a report that illustrates clear areas of opportunity for our state to take advantage of in preventing suicide. We are not going to be able to actually prevent suicides on the commission. We're 27 people coming up with recommendations. But it would be a failure, in my opinion, if our report didn't provide some clear recommendations and strategies that were actually tangible. We need to actually provide some resources that the state can take and actually implement that are pragmatic approaches that will fit within the scope of the activities that we can already do, thinking about ways to reorganize things, thinking about ways to implement pragmatic approaches and really interestingly connect people across industries, as I think is really important. One of the reasons that it's so great that all of these people come from different disciplines is that I view one of the opportunities in the state would be really to connect people across all these different areas. That's been a failure in the state, but more importantly, just a failure across the country, where we just have not done a great job traditionally of connecting people across industries and having people work together on these solutions.
I can tell, as chair of the commission, you don't want this to be a report that's submitted next spring and someone looks at it and puts it up on a shelf.
We want it to be actionable. We want real pragmatic solutions that are affordable for the state. You can't provide a bunch of recommendations that nobody could actually do. So we want things that are pragmatic, affordable, but make a lot of sense and have high value and high impact on saving people's lives.
Jojo, does the fact that the governor has formed this commission, 27 members from around the state, a lot of stakeholders on this commission, does that give you any hope?
It does. It does give me, because I feel like we are moving towards a direction that the state legislation will take action on. And I think that's a huge step. I think it's a huge step to get to schools across the state, not just like one or two schools in your community. Everybody's trying to do something. If you've been affected by a suicide in your school, you're trying to do something. You're trying to put something into place. It would be nice to have something in place before you had an incident at your school. And that should be available to all schools across all of Michigan. And so having the state involved, I think, is something I would really hope happens for our state.
And it certainly seems that, as Chair Dr. Ramadani shares your desire to not have this be some report that someone puts up on a shelf. He talks about practical solutions, pragmatic solutions. What might that look like, do you think? What are some actions that you would love to see them take?
I would love to see them fund a crisis counselor for every single building in every school district. I would love to see mental health as a graduation requirement at the high school level. I would love to see things like mindfulness and that trauma-informed instruction to be mandatory professional development for back to school each year. I know here in Bloomfield Hills, we are going to have trauma-informed professional development in August for every single employee in the school district. Is that important? And I'm kind of at the point where it's great hearing these things. This is not the first governor to have a task force on mental health or suicide prevention, but I'm at the point now in my life, my career, where it's all about talk less, do more. And if you're not at that spot, there's no point in us having a conversation.
Seth, what are you looking for from the commission?
Well, I would completely echo what Patrick just said. Obviously, you work in schools for a while, and you hear there's always new ideas. There's lots of data that comes out, and we're ready for an actual plan that comes forward from the state. And I think a big piece and I applaud the state for doing this. I'm looking forward to what they come out with. I think a big piece that I hope to see is that there is schools that are doing really interesting things in all of these areas and really effective things. Mindfulness, we're creating our own curriculum as we're going along. And I would encourage the state to kind of reach out to these schools and say, hey, what's working, and incorporate that into their own plan. Because it's, I think ideally there is ideas that are cohesive across the state. But I think we should incorporate a lot of things that schools are doing. There's a lot of really creative human beings working in schools around the state and really caring. I think individually, a really big piece that has come up is a crisis counselor in every school. I think that's invaluable. And that's one area we're very fortunate. We're a small school. We only have about 750 students in our district. And one of our full-time counselors is specifically for social emotional counseling of our students. That's all she does. And it's huge. She's overwhelmed. She's extremely busy, and I try to take care of her as much as possible, but it's really invaluable. And so I would love to see that in every school across the state.
Dr. Jackie, we are having hard national conversations right now about inequality, and we certainly know there are districts that are haves and districts that are have-nots. What can our nation be doing in order to ensure that youngsters who are in the have-not districts get their share of mental health care?
Well, one of the things that I think that we can do is, one, also create diversity, go back and talk about the importance of diversity, the importance of inclusion, just like in the conversation of racism has to start as well. When I look even part of mental health and the lack thereof is when young people don't see themselves and they are not proud because they don't see themselves in books. We still go to social studies books, and we can still see a lack of other races besides one race, Caucasian race. And so those things impact you over time. If we're still reading about the manifest destiny in social studies, we have a long ways to go because we need to have programs that are also going to be able to impact youth of various backgrounds, various cultures, not just celebrate once a month for Black History Month, for Native American Month, for Cinco de Mayo. Those are times of the past. While we're celebrating, we need to also hear stories. We need to change curriculum. We need to hire individuals and counselors from various backgrounds. That is critical, because unless you know a community, you can't really help the community. I can tell you there's so many counselors who have never even walked the community that they work in, teachers who haven't walked the community that they work in, and parents. Jojo, I'm hearing you and I'm touched. And I want to remind you, parents have a big voice and they do want to see change. But I do think it's one of the things that's very important is for our young people, if they're going to feel proud, and they're going to have a strong self-sense of who they are, they also need to have not just role models, but they need to have real models. And those real models need to be hired in the campuses, working with young people, sharing their stories, seeing positive people that they can reflect that look like them, and also changing our literature and including the positive stories, not just football and not just sports, but I'm talking about individuals who are working, who are leading, who are head of organizations that look like them. That's got to be absolutely changed in our curriculum. The curriculum is tilted to one side and everybody knows it, and that's not helpful. And those kinds of real, raw, difficult conversations also have to be had if we're going to move further in the right direction. So I believe it's more than hiring counselors, but it's looking at hiring a variety of diverse counselors to support a diverse group of youth that they'll be working with. And they need training as well on that, on cultural diversity.
And now let's hear from the Detroit Public Schools Community District on the issue of youth suicide. What do you most need from the state of Michigan, from the federal government, that would help you and your educators meet the mental health needs of your students?
We have launched a partnership with Trails. We actually, in the last year, conducted a never before done survey. When you're asking me, what do we need? Let me just put the parameters around the need. So in that survey, 62% of 8th through 12th graders surveyed shared that they have mild to severe depression. 56% of students shared that they have mild to severe anxiety. 23% of students have thought about attempting suicide in the last 12 months. Additionally, nearly 3/5 of support staff asked for professional development on general information about mental illness and suicide risk identification and prevention. So when you're thinking about what the district needs, first of all, you need to look at what the needs assessment says. And so the needs assessment is saying that our students definitely have a need for support, and our teachers are saying we need support. We need additional support in professional development, in identifying mental illness, and then identifying suicidal tendencies or triggers or signs. And so while we're working with the University of Michigan Trails, what we're doing is providing some professional development to our staff. I think organizations like Trails need additional support. This is their expertise. This is what they do. This is not something that just anybody should just start doing. This is very specific work, and this is something that we need highly competent, trained individuals to offer. So I would say additional funding for professional development for our adults, additional funding for wraparound services for young people, including whether that's counseling that comes to the school, so social workers, counselors, psychologists at the school. And so increasing those types of positions in the schools, I think, is a good step. And I think giving additional support to community-based mental health agencies is another really important piece.
And just briefly, final thoughts, if we will. We are in an era that our generations are going to be studying about what is happening in the world and in our country right now in this era. There's so much change, which can produce growth. Do you feel hopeful that we might move in a more positive direction that does support our kids? Jackie, what do you think?
Yes, I'm extremely optimistic. I am, this is different. This is different. This is different than 92. This is different than 68. This is something I've never seen before in my lifetime, where the entire globe has rallied. I mean, when I see people in London, in Germany, in Russia, when I see people beyond California, beyond the state, beyond the city, really speaking around, and young people who are, these are real strong, peaceful protests that are making change, and they are not looking for the next leader to come over the hill. They're realizing that they are the leader themselves. This is different. And while there are some who want peace, there's still others who want quiet. And there is a very strong volume that is raising up. This is not going to go away quickly. I know individuals think that it will, or it's going to phase off. Well, it seems like there's a surge for change. And I believe that it's impacting also young people to be empowered. And I think that's going to help with what we just talked about. When we talk about, social emotional learning and raising that voice and confidence and self-esteem, all of those are impacting youth even better than schools. can do, because they're out there doing something different, learning from the world themselves. So I believe that this is helpful, and I think that we should use this, not talk about it, but actually integrate it in the schools, integrate it in the conversations, integrate it in the classrooms, integrate it in professional development, and not be afraid to talk about it. You need a plan, but that plan needs to include what are we going to look like and what are we going to do? Because parents like JoJo are looking and they're watching and they're waiting. So they have a big responsibility, and it's beyond test scores. It's beyond our kids fluent in reading. It's beyond let's get the academics down. It's beyond all of those things we used to do. It's now what change are we going to make that's going to make a difference in the lives of our youth?
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. And thanks to each of our guests for the work and the advocacy you are doing. We really value that, and we thank you for sharing your time with us today. And this conversation about ending youth suicide, it cannot stop here. It needs to be discussed in every school and in every home where there are young people who are suffering. So as I said at the beginning of the show, of course, the statistics on suicide are sobering, but let's take heart that there are so many caring people like the ones that we have met here today, deeply committed to the cause of suicide awareness and prevention. From the home to the classroom to state capitals, we all need to redouble our efforts to bring an end to youth suicide, because truly we can't wait any longer. This is Cynthia Canty for Detroit Public Television. Thank you for being with us.